Welcome to the Grey Matter podcast. We set up this podcast to have deep conversations with people who are thriving on the outside. We're here to learn about the stuff in their grey matter. And we're here for the grey area stories. We're here to humanize the pursuit of success, performance, health span, and well-being. Let's try to unearth what we actually want and what actually matters to us. Dr. Mythili Pandi is a physician and our women's health doctor here at Matter. In her practice, she has a strong focus on preventive health, women's health, and long-term well-being. At Matter, she works closely with clients to move beyond symptom-based care and towards true health optimization. She also brings deep expertise in all things motherhood, supporting mothers and babies through feeding challenges, early postpartum recovery, and the complex interplay between birth and hormones. With a holistic yet evidence-based approach, she combines clinical medicine with lifestyle, helping individuals understand their bodies, make informed decisions, and build sustainable habits that support health span and not just lifespan. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Dr. Mythili, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely, pleasure.
I have an observation to make. So we've been on this mission, on this path of trying to figure out how to work together. And over the last few weeks, as I've been talking to you, something stood out to me as quite stark in a good way. I was asking you about the work that you wanted to do. I was surprised by how clear it was to you what you wanted to do. And it was just about helping people and seeing patients and working with women. And I think maybe that's just sort of how you live your life and it's your day-to-day and it's maybe like a sense of purpose for you. But it was interesting to me because in the world that I come from with building a business and, you know, in this country, everyone's a hustler. It stood out to me as like, wow, it's so pure for you. Like it feels like you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm just wondering where that all comes from.
I think it started as a child. It's funny because we grew up together in a very large household, right? And I would reenact the scenes of childbirth with my cousins right at the front of our doorstep. So, you know, we'd have one of my cousins laying down and giving birth, and then I'll hold the baby up and say, it's a child, it's a boy, you know, things like that. And I've always been fascinated with childbirth and pregnancy and having babies and all of those sorts of things. So it was very natural for me to want to delve into the obstetrics and gynecology world, right? And so after medicine, that's where I started in ONG in a very busy maternity hospital. And I then realized that with all of the help that we are given during pregnancy and the childbirth, the massive gap in this whole business was the immediate postpartum, because the obstetricians would be very happy, you know, helping the mom with the birth and everything. And then once the mom leaves the hospital, no one really looks after her very much anymore until the next check-in. But the baby's well looked after. They've got the pediatricians on board. But what happens to the relationship between the mom and the baby? And that's the gap that I had noticed. And so during my work with the Breastfeeding Mothers Support Group, which is a local charity, that's when I realized that this is where I really need to be. This is the gap that I needed and I could fill. So started working towards it, became a family physician, got my IBCLC certificates. And then when the opportunity came up for me to take on mother and child, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. Close to 3 years ago now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But even during that process, I realized that there's so much of nutritional deficiencies that these women go through. Like even as me having my babies at 16, 14, and 11 years ago, I realized that I must have been so nutritionally depleted during the pregnancies that postpartum, even though I had, you know, the euphoria and feeling really like on top of the world, it wasn't sustainable. There'll be dips and crashes, not necessarily the postpartum blues, but I think it really came from the lack of nourishing food. Well, maybe not nourishing food, but the foods that I needed to kind of replenish. Or even the fact that because I was vegetarian and pretty strict as a vegetarian, not having too much dairy and eggs because, you know, love animals. That's a different story for a different day. But just not having enough iron, right, postpartum would have had an impact on how I perceived the world and how I perceived being a mom and even breastfeeding and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, that's another gap that I would love to fill.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just, I mean, we all have kids here, and I'm just thinking back to the sort of first few months, you're just eating whatever, whenever, because there's so much to do, right? So part of it is just like you're just trying to get food in your system. But the other side of it is, I guess, the lack of knowledge of what to eat, right? I'm quite confident in my knowledge of what you should eat if you're trying to be healthy. But if you were to ask me specifically what should a mother be eating in the first 3 months postpartum, I don't have an answer for you. And like, I don't actually know what tweaks should be made.
Exactly. And I think that's a knowledge gap, right? I mean, instead of just eating the right foods and having a confinement and cook all of these meals for you or even get it delivered to you, shouldn't we be testing to find out what you're lacking in your system before we try and replenish it and see if even the foods that you're eating is sufficient to replenish those gaps?
I think to your point around that immediate postpartum phase of your life, you're generally well educated through your obstetrician about, taking the necessary supplements just before you conceive, during the pregnancy and after. But nobody explains to you what that immediate postpartum period could potentially look like. I remember for me, when my hair started falling out, it was so distressing. I was shedding so much. And as a trained medical doctor, you kind of, you're taught about what happens and the biology around, you've got the highest level of estrogen, and that's why your skin glows and your hair is so luscious during pregnancy. But then that crash came after delivery, and it was really distressing, like for me personally. And I was like, well, what do I do now? And I think even as a trained doctor, there was, like you spoke about, it's that gap of like, okay, who do I turn to? What do I do? What should I be doing?
Yeah.
And I think moving forward, I think that's something that a lot of women need and should be educated on and have services to access, because it'll make that postpartum period, I believe, a lot more. They'll be able to make sense of a lot of things that are happening to them.
But even during pregnancy, right? Because we know that the baby leaches out so much iron for them to create, their bodies, right? All of that iron has to come from somewhere, and often it is from the mother's body. Yeah. Their own supplies, right? So moms, even towards the second and the third trimesters, are very often iron deficient. And so if you don't have enough iron, what about childbirth? You need iron for muscle contractions, right? And the uterus itself is a muscle. Doesn't that have an impact on how your birth would be, your labor process and the delivery process? Yes.
Yeah.
So we know that 70% of the population, the female population, I would even say almost 90% of us, iron deficient already, right? And I think close to 100% would be iron deficient while they're pregnant, even prior to the delivery process.
Yeah.
That's such a practical thing to be able to think about, because then you can supplement with iron, you can eat more iron-rich foods, you can get iron IVs, whatever it is, even just that. And it's crazy because I have 2 kids, and I feel like my wife and I are quite intelligent.
Yeah.
But I've never thought about this before. I've never, as much as I've read about nutrition and as prepared as we were reading my wife's a psychologist, and she had a special interest in developmental psychology. So we were so into it when we were trying to figure out how to have a baby and do well with it. Never really came across any of that about iron.
Yeah, blind spot. And so many blind spots in our world.
I think, okay, so, there are service providers like us that are trying to sort of fill that gap and build a layer of support for people who currently don't know where to go. So that's one side of it, right? But I think we just touched on something here, which is the knowledge gap. When I think about that in the context of what Shireen just said a couple of minutes ago, which is even as a doctor, knowing what the hell was going on in her body, when her hair started to fall out, it was very distressing. I think that will be a very healthy message for people to hear about if they're going through this phase right now. Even if you know all the stuff, it is still super stressful. Maybe what we can help with now is, in this phase of postpartum, since that's the topic that we were on, what is going on hormonally? What is it that people need to understand about estrogen, progesterone? You've told me a little bit about this. Maybe you can start with the hair loss because that's what you mentioned just now. But like, there's a whole cascade of stuff that goes on, and parents are just trying to get through it, right? So I think if people understood a little bit more, they would feel better about it, or at least feel like this is just part of the process.
When you're looking at it through the lens, what I would like clients or patients to do is have a basic understanding of the biology, because that is what's driving everything in your body, right? And if you understand that, you know, from the time that once you've conceived, your body now has to go into, it pivots into, right, I need to protect this embryo that is growing and this fetus that is multiplying cell by cell as the months go on. And that becomes the priority, right? And it is going to pull from the mother's reserves to maintain that. And along with that comes changes in hormonal levels to support that pregnancy, right? And I think, you know, one of an easy, I guess, maybe starting point would be your estrogen levels, right? That rise significantly during your pregnancy to support the fetus and the pregnancy to term. And there's great benefits that come with excessive levels of estrogen. You know, your skin starts to glow. That's why mothers have beautiful skin. Your hair starts to become grows a lot faster, is luscious. You know, it has effects on your mood as well. And our hormones have such an integral part in our overall well-being. We have to respect it and appreciate it and understand what the role is during pregnancy. But then if you fast forward, you know, you get to the end of your pregnancy and now you give birth. And at that point in time, your estrogen levels drop. They literally crash to the floor after pregnancy, because now the body doesn't need to maintain the fetus and the pregnancy anymore, right? And so again, when those levels start to drop, there's consequences that start to happen, right? For example, the hair shedding and things like that. So I think it's understanding what is happening on a biological front to then start to almost look backwards in time, I feel, for women. And I guess, you know, before we get to sort of postpartum, you also need to look at what happens before the pregnancy even starts. Because if we're talking about how do you support the metabolic processes, it has to go back to even before you've conceived, right? To get the body to an optimal state that it can support itself during the maturation of the egg, which takes about 3 months on average. And that continues throughout. And then going into the postpartum period.
Yeah, and we'll definitely, I have it in my notes that we're going to go through that as well. It's a huge topic, right? When it comes to just generally fertility and reproductive health and trying to set yourself up in a good way for the future. But just to stick to this like postpartum phase for a little while. And I do know you also have a special interest in mental health when it comes for mothers during this period. One thing that we're all aware of, once you get to child rearing age, is this concept of postnatal depression or postpartum depression. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
And it seems like there's a spectrum. Like I've seen so many friends go through this phase, us included. And for some people, it's just blues. For some people, you know, it's overwhelming, maybe like hints of anxiety sort of state. And it's just chaos, right? And then it hits some people really, really hard. Hearing what Dr. Shireen was just talking about, obviously this is in part hormonal, but what else is going on? And what do we need to know about this sort of phase? Can I call it that?
Yeah.
Or like what? Yeah.
We call it the fourth trimester in some cases, right? So like what Shireen had mentioned, there is a cliff, right? So all the way up to the birth of the baby, the estrogen and the progesterone are super high, right? And it really just drops. It's a sheer cliff drop, like almost 50 to 100 times drop in the levels. And that has a huge change in how the brain wiring system is, right? So while everything's nice, fine, and dandy, and you're nesting and you're feeling really comfortable in your skin's nice and stretched and you're feeling glowy, as soon as you hit that cliff and it drops down to nothing, everything starts to shift. We're talking about feeling like you don't have things in your hand. You know, you've had a nice, beautiful baby growing inside you, and now everything is just flattened out, right? The mood's flattened. And you might find that, yes, you're mixing between euphoria and just feeling really low. Like, oh my gosh, I've got a baby now. I should be feeling grateful, to feeling like, what the heck am I doing? I don't know how to rear a child. Why do I have a child? You know, and at the same time, you have these conflicting emotions of, you know, just needing to look after the baby and also just, you know, having intrusive thoughts. We can talk about that in detail as well. But so 80% of women will have some kind of blues, right? And these blues will be just feeling sad or crying because you're feeling like you're in conflict with your own emotions. 20, or let's call it 19%, would have really severe depression that lasts, blues that lasting for more than 2 weeks. And that 1% might even go into postpartum psychosis, like hallucinating, like going into mania, and, you know, also the other side of just really feeling down.
Yeah, I think if you are in sort of the 20% that really, really, really not doing well, the solution obviously is to go and try and get some professional help.
Yeah.
But for everyone that falls into the category of, this is just super hard, and I flip-flop between, you know, a tremendous amount of joy and what the hell have we done? I don't know what I'm doing. This is so hard.
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, most of our experience, right? What are you supposed to do? Like, what are you supposed to say to yourself? How do you get through that? Like, is there a rubric we can follow? Are there some simple things that we can do as young parents to, you know, not fall apart, or to pull ourselves back together after we fall apart?
I think it's really about having conversations. And it could be with your partner, it could be with your best friend. It could actually just be a phone call to someone who can help you. And knowing that these people exist actually makes a huge difference. Knowing that there's a support group, knowing that there are people in a group chat who might be able to assist with this. Having a lifeline to call, right? And you want to make sure that you're also calling someone who isn't going to be providing advice or judgment, just to be able to rant. And I think everyone needs a person to rant with, you know?
Yeah.
You don't have to need anything. You just want to be able to output. Do you know what I mean?
I also did realize, now that I'm thinking back, I remember, you know, trying to be as strong of a support pillar as I could be for my wife. And like, it was fine.
Yeah.
But there were certain points where she just wanted to talk to other in-laws.
Yeah.
Like, without saying it to him, she's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Without saying that, she was just like, you don't really understand. Which was fine, right? Which was a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you want support from people that understand the sort of ups and downs of it.
You know how a lot of moms also coop themselves up in a house or in a room because, you know, you're not supposed to get wind into your bones and things, like very typical Asian confinement practice. Sometimes when they step out of their houses, everything just feels a bit better. And I encourage that, right? Do it with or without the baby. Sometimes you just need to be able to know there's life outside of this four walls, right? And that makes a huge difference. So, yeah.
Is it making you think back?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have the confinement practices in South Africa, you know, but there is that, I would say, well, one, I think there's a lot of stigma still around postpartum depression, and I think women, or a lot of women who are undergoing that, maybe to some extent there's that lack of education, so they're not fully aware of what's happening to them and inside their bodies. And then, you know, the partners as well, you know, the husbands or other partners that are involved in the process are experiencing it from an outsider's perspective and possibly also don't understand what's happening. But if I look back and I recall, it's that conflict of, you've got this baby who's really demanding, and, you know, it's a 24/7 job. And if you're breastfeeding on demand, that also disrupts your sleep and everything that you're doing. So your full attention is to this little one. And even stepping away from that sometimes can create a lot of guilt, you know, like as a mum. But I think it's important for I suppose you could use the analogy of when you're flying, right? And they tell you you need to put on your oxygen mask first before you put it on your baby. It's the same principle here, right? If you're a mum, you can only give your all if you've got the reserves and the capacity. And I think that's an important perspective to have. So put on your oxygen mask and prioritize that self-care. And I think we need to also, as mothers, be okay with taking that time that's needed. Like you said, stepping out and knowing that there's other things beyond this four wall and it's okay.
You must hear about this all the time from the mothers that you work with. My
Every
wife
day.
is currently still like that because our youngest is 8 months old, and I had these conversations with her almost daily, and she has this guilt. Even just stepping out to go play pickleball or go do yoga, she has this guilt. And I'm curious about what advice you sort of give, because you're having these conversations every day with him, right?
Yeah. I mean, I say often, do what you need to do, right? Eat something, get some fresh air. Have your baby on your chest, like so strap them into a carrier. Actually, just go out and meet other moms. Because you need to know that you're not alone, right? There's so much more to the world than just struggling through things. And also, I find that women also need to learn how to put blinders on, because everyone with a mouth will say something that may have an impact on how you're feeling about mothering your child or being a parent, right? Everyone will have an opinion.
Everyone has an opinion. So
Everyone.
true.
The NTUC cashier will have an opinion on how you're parenting your child. But really, it's about knowing that you can do this. We are all given an opportunity to do what we want to do. And, you just have to try and do it the best that you can. You're not going to mess up so badly that we cannot, rectify things. So I think it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be an okay parent.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the best parent in the
Yeah.
world, but it's okay to
Good is enough.
That's
It doesn't have
enough.
to be
It's okay.
perfect.
a good
Yeah.
enough parent is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good line. It's okay to be an okay parent.
Yeah, I like
and I have
that.
to use that quite a lot. I have to use that. I'm using it right now. Xander was super mad at me this morning. So I feed him. Michaela and I make breakfast and then feed them every morning. He was so mad at me this morning because I left to come do this. Right?
Oh.
He was like, "How dare you?"
How did you
Like,
leave me in the
in
morning?
his screen, right? He's like, "You put this food here, and then you're gonna leave. How dare you?" Yeah, it's okay to be an okay parent.
Yeah.
I am curious if you guys have any thoughts or advice about the father's role,
Oh,
especially
so
in this
much.
postpartum phase.
Yes.
Yeah, like what is it? I remember feeling pretty useless, and like trying to be like quite an involved parent, respecting and understanding that the baby, like 1 month into life, didn't know what the hell was going on, needed to bond with someone, made sense to bond with the person breastfeeding, all that. I got it, but I felt most of my role was logistics, washing the bottles, like, figuring out like food, getting food into my wife's mouth, like stuff like that. But I kind of felt useless with like the parenting stuff.
Yeah.
In that first few months.
Oh, this is a minefield. All right, it's a gold mine.
Wherever you feel like starting.
Yeah. Can I just side note this? This is exactly my next project in Mother and Child.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
Sure.
I'm trying to put together a program. So we run something called Mindful Moms for Moms already, right? So this is where a counselor comes in and moms talk about anything that, they want to talk about. So prenatally, postpartum, or during the, everything in between. Once you're a postpartum mom, you're always a postpartum mom. I still consider myself a postpartum mom, right? But we didn't have anything like that for dads. So we've now created something called the Dad's Room, and where we have dads coming in. It could be, just expecting a baby, or they might be in the process of being postpartum dads. And they're just coming in to meet with other dads and chat. And it's a free space. And it's with a counselor, so they could throw ideas out. They could kind of be a support group for other dads. I think it's going to be powerful. But alongside that, you know how we talk about mothering and parenting? dads often have a very sideline job, right? Like they're on the benches, you know, they're just going to give you a towel when they need it. They're going to give you some water, might give you some food, like what you had mentioned. But I think the beauty of it now is that dads are so much more involved in parenting. And I think this is something that is really magical. I don't think my husband actually parented my kids as much as I would have liked him to do so right now. You know, I feel like we need to have dads more involved in the player space, right? So I think dads are fantastic. They've got so many sensory things. They've got beards and, you know, strong manly chests. They are perfect to do skin to skin with babies. I think it's beautiful. That's how babies bond. They're never meant to be apart and swaddled like a potato in a plastic bassinet. They're meant to be in touch with a human being. And if moms are done with the breastfeeding, dads can pick the baby up and put them skin to skin and soothe them and walk around with them, strap them onto their chest in a carrier, bounce with them on a big Swiss ball. They love it. Babies absolutely love being bounced, right? They can help with just singing to them, talking to them about the stock markets, about, you know, the latest news, about, you know, what's happening around the world, all sorts of things. Dads are the best playmates. And I think we underestimate how important they are. Nappy changes, showers, bath time, you know, sensory play, all of those things dads can do. Why are we not allowing them to do it? Right? But we need to equip them with the skills. How are dads shown how to carry the baby? Can they roughhouse with a newborn? Absolutely, yes. I've never seen a hip roll off. Knock on wood. You know, dads can do that.
Yeah.
Dads can also look after the moms, you know, and that's what they can do.
I think you touched on something quite interesting there. When I think back and I think about the other fathers like me who I know who are actively trying to be active parents, there is an element of like shyness and maybe a bit of embarrassment when you first start on the journey, because you never really paid attention until you had kids, and so you don't really know how to do all the stuff. And it's actually not for lack of wanting to, it's what to do.
Yeah.
And in that situation, you're like a little bit embarrassed, a little bit like, who should I ask? Like, how should I didn't even think about, I didn't put two and two together until right now. I think that's what's getting in the way for a lot of founders. Yeah, the lack of knowing how.
Yeah. And so that's the next project that I'm going to
Yeah,
embark
fantastic.
on. I think it's like, it's dad skills, you know, how to be a dad 101.
Yeah, I love it because like we can, it is quite fun to joke about because I do love those awkward moments, but a man generally loves nothing more than to feel useful. And so in the time of his life where his wife is going through the most ridiculous journey that she's been on, if he can step in and feel useful and like he can help her and help the whole situation, it will make a world of difference for the father's experience of family.
Yeah.
Where did that bring your mind?
No, it brought it to side a cesarean section.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, after Imran was born, I gave birth in South Africa, and the first thing that they did after they did the initial APGARs and checks, you know, they gave him to my husband, and they were like, right, there's your little recliner chair, skin to skin contact. And I know that that's a very common, and it's a practice that's done all the time, but I think it's extending that as well, like making sure, and for dads also to understand like what's happening, like why does the baby need that skin to skin contact? Like how does it calm their nervous system? Because essentially it's also like the baby's then syncing with your heartbeat, right? The sound that the fetus and the baby has had while inside the mother was the mother's heartbeat, right? And so having that skin to skin contact, like having the baby hearing and feeling the vibrations of the heartbeat on the chest is calming to the baby. And so there's this natural like sync that starts to happen. And I think that's maybe the part that a lot of parents or dads in particular maybe don't necessarily know, like what is the connection there? Why is it so valuable? But it's very powerful as well. And I think it's maybe something that's done initially, like immediately after the birth. You know, they place it because the dad's there in the delivery room take the baby, hold it. But, that practice should really continue for as long as you possibly can in those immediate few weeks after the baby's born, for sure.
It's a nice big warm hug, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels so good to be able to connect with your child and, screaming and crying, to know that you're part of the process in helping them calm down, helping them learn to calm down. It's like it feels so good. It feels like there's nothing more important than this moment right here. It does really feel like that when you can help a kid. Some of the most special moments I had with Michaela, who's 6 now, are moments like that. Because up until today, because I have this relationship with her, when she's going through something and she's sort of like freaking out, she will come to me and she'll need to like sort of be here.
Yeah.
And it'll take us a couple of minutes and then we'll just get everything slowed down, and then she breathes, and then it feels like we sync, and she's like,
Yeah.
and then she kind of gets through it. And why don't we have more of that as adults?
Exactly. I think that's what hugs are, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. I think there was a funny study that I just read recently that you need about 5 to 7 hugs a day to feel loved, to feel calm.
And they got to be long.
And they've got, I was going to say, it's
Yeah.
the duration as
It's
well
not
of
just
the hug.
and that's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a bunch about this postpartum phase and kind of skipped ahead. I am really curious, because I have you two here, what is it that you wish people in their sort of 20s and 30s, maybe early 30s, more like 20s, knew about the pre-pregnancy phase? I guess we call it how to create a healthy environment if you do want to have kids. That phase there when typically you're in your 20s, you're working really hard, you're not sleeping, you're partying, you don't really need to watch what you eat because you
Metabolism.
and you just like, you can sleep 3 hours, go for an exercise class, go to work, and then go drinking that night. Like, it's fine. What is it that you wish women knew in that phase if what they wanted to do later on was have kids?
Wow. Feels not so long ago, although it was about 20 years ago. I think, wow. I think it's really important that women know that if they wanted to have kids, it is probably important that they are also prioritizing their diet, their lifestyle a little bit, right? It's hard to preach when, at this point in time, that that's what I used to do at 20. But I think it's about getting as much lifestyle management as possible. So the sleep, the diet, maybe just exercise and nutrition as well. But at least being conscious of it. Like knowing that you need to fill your reserves at some point in time before you wanted to think or even have thought of having a child later on.
So
in
it's
life.
not really a conversation about don't
Don't do it.
It's not don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not like don't go have all the fun, but as you're doing that, also build some really basic lifestyle habits. Just have it be part of how you live your life.
That's it.
Now, we talked about nutrition, sleep, exercise. That's
Basic. That's the basics, really. And if you know that you have had a very limited or restricted diet, then obviously supplementing and making sure that you're getting all the nutrition that you need, because that's when you actually build your bones, right? In the 20s. Because once you reach 30, it's a gradual decline in your bone strength,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I echo that. I think one of the things that a lot of women don't necessarily know is that at the time, if they're planning to conceive and they're in the process of doing that, at the time that you're going to ovulate, that egg that is going to be released, waiting for fertilization, is essentially been in the making for the last 3-4 months. So if you then look back in time, essentially, you should be ideally giving your body at least 4 to 6 months of prep before you even consider the conception part. Why? Because if you're wanting to give, let's say, the best quality egg that you possibly can, then you got to build the foundations before the time. That's not to say that you have to be rigid, or you've got to cut away everything. But like Dr. Mythili just said, build up that capacity and that reserves, because what you ultimately want is the day that you do fall pregnant, or that egg that gets fertilized, that is the best quality egg that you can produce at that moment in time. And to do that, it means focusing on the foundational things, making sure that you're getting enough protein, enough fiber, enough healthy fats, that you're focused on, strength-based training is important, because you must remember, if you fall pregnant, you got to carry this growing baby. That's a lot of strain on your lower back. All those types of things come into play later on. And so the opportunity is to be proactive as part of the process. And then I think there is, of course, a role for supplementation. We know that women should be on a prenatal multivitamin, but there's also a role there to do some baseline checks as well. Like, what is your nutritional status at that point in time? And is there anything there that needs to be optimized through diet, through supplementation, etc.? If you're iron deficient, or maybe you've got heavy periods, right? Are we making sure that your reserves are where it could be optimized to help support the journey that you're on?
Yeah, I hear you. And look, I know for this next question that I'm going to ask, the real value will come when you guys get to see people on a one-on-one level. But can I stretch you to give some practical recommendations for women that are just trying to eat better to support this phase that they're sort of like moving towards, or to sleep better, or to like what should they be thinking about in terms of exercise and sleep and nutrition?
Yeah, sure.
I would always say start having as much iron-rich foods, have red meat.
Spinach, red meat, okay.
Yeah, spinach, red meat, vegetables have lots of fiber. Have the eggs, you want lots of CoQ10, which comes from red meat and eggs and that sort of thing as well. You want to have enough choline that comes from eggs and red meat as well. Just kind of optimize all of those bits, iron-rich foods. What else? I mean,
the calcium.
Folate.
The
calcium.
The calcium is important.
Yeah.
Because once your baby starts to grow, it's going to start sucking that calcium from you, right?
You're less important than the baby,
exactly.
right?
The baby is prioritized throughout that pregnancy. And so again, like from a reserve and capacity building standpoint, you want to make sure that you've got enough reserves, because your baby's going to start pulling from that. So calcium is definitely something that you want to look into and understand from your own diet. And when I do health coaching with clients, I often tell them, you can get an idea or a general idea of eating habits. But what I sometimes suggest is, to clients is take 2 weeks and do a food diary and document what you're eating.
Don't change anything.
Just document it. That then gives us data points that we can pull from and get some rough estimates of how much protein are you taking in on average in a day? What is your fiber like, right? What is your healthy fats like? What are some of the iron-rich foods maybe that you're eating or not eating? And so from that 2-week food diary, we can then start to get a good idea of where you're at, what your baseline is, and that then becomes something that we then start tweaking over time to try and meet higher protein daily requirements, to try to hit that fiber goal of 25 to 30 grams per day, right? To make sure that you're getting enough iron-rich foods, and that from a calcium standpoint, your diet is optimized for that. And if it's not, then that's, of course, where the role of supplementation comes in.
I think that's a fantastic strategy. It's so simple, but so powerful from a behavior change perspective. When you start with it, let's just document for 2 weeks. It gives us access to preferences and patterns. And when it comes to behavior change and trying to make the tweaks, it often works better to base the change off of what their natural preferences are for protein sources, fiber sources, and what their current patterns are for when they like to eat and when they do their activities. And eating always happens around the activities that we do. It's probably a much better place to start making some tweaks than, hey, here's a list of 8 things, you can only eat these foods now. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like the chances of that failing are quite high.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we need to respect as well, is everybody has different food preferences. You know, you're a relatively strict vegetarian, for example, right? So that has an impact on the foods that you are generally going to take and prefer to eat. One of the other tips that I generally also give health coaching clients is I say, all right, because the first question is, well, what are the iron-rich foods, right? Or where am I going to get my calcium from? I don't really like drinking milk, those types of questions. And what I suggest they do is, my first question is, well, do you have Pinterest? If you have Pinterest, great. If you don't have it, you've got Google. But, you know, if you go into like Pinterest, for example, and you type in iron-rich food sources, it will come out with these beautiful little pictures of different foods, the grams, and, you know, the sort of what all of that contains. You can do it for protein, you can do it for fiber, you can do it for healthy fats, anything. And then you can take that as a reference and be like, all right, I know I need to up my protein index, but maybe I don't like cottage cheese, right? But here are the other options that I can choose from. And I can then pull that in based on my own preferences. And as long as I understand what I'm trying to achieve over time, then I can start being strategic in what I'm pulling in and trying to build over time.
It's such a good use of Pinterest.
I know, I love Pinterest.
I just use it.
I have boards for birthday.
I have
birthday parties. That's what I do. I never thought I could do it for.
I've got multiple boards, like protein, fiber.
Wow,
I
impressed.
just use it for tattoos.
Oh, right.
And that's
a good idea.
It's just tattoos.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and you can do it for exercise as well. And so some of the tips that I give to clients too is, you know, when you're talking about strength-based training, and I think if we're looking at this preconception period, right? Building your strength is hugely important, not just because you're potentially going to lose bone mass from your 30s, but you also need to be prepared to be carrying, that's a lot of load on your lower back.
And the pelvic floor.
And the pelvic floor, yeah. I mean, that's a whole discussion on its own, right? What happens after that and some of the challenges women sit with. But you can use that. And if you don't have Pinterest, you can go to Google and you can click on the images and you'll have the same thing. But it's an easy way for the, you know, any person to get access to information that they can take and that they can then use, right?
I think it's also a really good strategy, because when it comes to getting the change that we want and being able to stick with it in the long term, if we want to do it, so desire is high and it seems like something that would be interesting to us, our ability to stick to it is way more, right? So like as a strategy to, okay, I know I need to exercise, like what the hell do people do for exercise? Doing something like this and just going and looking on Pinterest, like what do people do? And then you can take that information, okay, these 4 things kind of look interesting to me. And you can take it to a professional and be like, look, I had a look and I had a think about it. I think some of these things would be interesting for me in terms of exercise, and I won't get bored of them. And then you can have a professional help you build a program around that, right? Because just because the majority of the research on strength training is, you know, college-aged men with barbells on their backs doesn't mean that that's the thing that you need to do to get stronger. There's so many options, and people don't really realize that. You gotta make it fun for yourself.
And it doesn't have to be in the gym. It could be on the beach, you know? It could be just doing stuff with your own body weight, right? Like you can make it fun.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a little bit, but sticking to this sort of like fertility sort of conversation in this pre-getting pregnant period.
Preconception.
I did not realize until my wife and I got to the age of trying to have kids how many people struggle to get pregnant. And it was quite a shock, actually, because I thought with the groups of friends that we had, we were all quite open, we were all quite willing to share what we were struggling with. And yeah, we were just kind of blindsided by it. We didn't go through any issues with fertility, but some of our closest friends have and are on this path.
Yeah.
And so like wherever you guys feel like starting, I feel like this warrants some discussion, right? Because part of it is there seems to be some stigma. There seems to be some, I don't know, maybe even a bit of embarrassment about it, or maybe the lack of forums to talk about it.
Yeah.
But also, like, what is the data on this, and what do we know about what we can do to work through this if we're in this sort of situation?
I think the reality of it really is that people are not getting pregnant until much later nowadays. And obviously, as time goes on, the egg quality starts to decrease, the sperm quality also starts to decrease. I mean, men are 50% of the problem, right? Sometimes it's about maybe thinking about starting earlier, or at least doing whatever you needed to do preconceptionally, like in terms of the nutrition, the sleep, the exercise, all of those sorts of things. Start that earlier, and maybe we might start to see a shift on how you might actually conceive later on. So I think this should just be common knowledge to everybody. Whether or not you wanted to have kids later on, start with all of these things. Get the backbone, get the foundations sorted early, and then maybe you might start to see a shift in how much easier it might be. But at the same time, we should also think about losses, not just conception, but maintaining the pregnancy as well. Because a lot of people, I mean, that is maybe, I safely say, about 60%. You can fall pregnant, but how do you keep the pregnancy going as well?
60% of
Women, I think the data is at this point in time, 30% of people who fall pregnant might lose it even before they realize they have lost the baby. So it's 1/3, right? And how do you then step up from that and try again, right? So again, preconception. I tried to figure out what it is that might, or what are the things that we could shift so that we might be able to keep the pregnancy for the next one.
What are some of the things that people can think about? Like, what are some of the things that can shift? Like, immediately my mind, I'm not sure if it's the right direction, my mind went to, oh, is this like a stress thing because we live ridiculous lifestyles, and when we are on this journey, there's some stuff that we should do to manage that, to help. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm talking about here.
No, I get it. But I think a lot of people don't know what they're talking about. And even as medical professionals, we don't know. It's very common. It's a lot more common than we like it to be. But it could be stress. It could be our lifestyles. It could be just not having enough nutrition, the reserves that Shireen's been talking about as well. Maybe it could be any of those things. Maybe it wasn't the right time. Maybe it's not the right place. Who knows? But how quickly can we step up? How quickly can we refill our buckets to be able to carry on, pick ourselves up again?
Yeah, I think the body is an amazing, intelligent thing, right? And everything is so intricately connected. And so when you talk about, you can't look at it in silos. You have to look at it holistically. And when you're looking at stress, for example, if you're floating on your sympathetic drive every single day, your cortisol levels are higher than what it should be, right? If you're sleeping shitty, then yes, that plays into your natural circadian rhythm. It's going to have an impact on a hormonal level on every front. You're going to have higher cortisol. Your appetite hormones are going to be out of whack. All of these things are so intricately connected. So when you approach it, it can't just be, all right, I'm just going to focus on this thing, right? That's not me saying that you shouldn't be measured in your approach. What I'm saying is that you can't look at it as this. Maybe it's just this. I think it's all of it together, and that is what's creating a situation or a circumstance for an individual or a certain patient or client. And so you got to start. It's like an onion, right? You got to unpack and peel away the layers. And then you got to get to like, right, okay, this is the baseline. And now how do we put this back together in a way that is going to make sense for this particular patient or client, in a way that is going to be sustainable, and that everybody, and I think, the other part that we need to acknowledge is that men are half of that equation, right? Their sperm quality is just as important. So while we talk about egg quality for women, we have to acknowledge that men fall in the same bucket, right?
And it's the same things, right? It's, are you sleeping well? Are you managing your stress? Are you exercising? Are you eating well?
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah,
it seems like if I zoom out from what you're saying, it's like you're not trying to steer people away from stressful situations. Like, that's part of life. There's nothing wrong with facing challenges. But if your whole life, from when you wake up until you go to bed, is just chaos, and you're redlining it on every front, you need to look at that. If you're on this journey, you're trying to be at the healthiest version of yourself for this next phase of life. It's not that you can't have your stressful job, but if you're having your stressful job and you're bringing the work home, and then you're allowing your relationships to continue to be chaos and blah, 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 then maybe you're not doing yourself any favors, right?
Yeah.
By not looking deeper, peeling the onion, and sort of addressing what else might need to be looked at, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's the component of the biological aspect of the patient or the client, right? But then in order for you to actually fall pregnant, you need to be having enough sex. And if you're struggling to manage the hours in the day, right? Like, my question is, are you having enough sex to be able to fall pregnant in the first place, right? And to do that, there needs to be the time and the space and the opportunity to
the quality of the
correct.
relationship as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
All of that plays a role too.
Not just like the 3 times a year when you go on vacation.
Yeah.
But like,
We don't talk about that enough.
It's not said as a joke.
No,
even though it is quite funny, but it's kind of sad as well, right? But that's, in this country, that's how we live, right? I have friends who literally, like, married with kids, and I don't judge them. It's just like the industries that they're in, the lives that they have to lead, or they feel they have to lead. They don't see each other until the weekends, which for me is ridiculous. Like, you leave home before your kids are up, and you get home after they've gone to bed, and then you connect as a family or with your partner when you go on vacation, like 2-3 times per year. Like, for me, I'm not blaming anyone for the lives that they have to lead, but it seems to me like we've fucked something up there on a societal level.
Yeah.
I think Singapore actually is supposed to be one of the countries that have the least amount of sex. Is that right? I think there's some statistic.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. But I think that's also a topic that has a lot of stigma and taboo, and people are not openly talking about that, and what the cost of success in terms of, and Singapore, as you mentioned earlier, being sort of a hustle country, comes at a cost, right? And I think we're seeing that, with the birth rates now down to 0.87. We're now, Singapore's in a quite a big predicament right now, right? I mean, there's lots of factors that fall into, why that level is so low. But the reality is we maybe are not prioritizing the intimate relationships that we are in, or nurturing it to the extent that we are able to have sex often, right? Which is important, particularly if you're wanting to conceive, but also just from a human level,
just
right?
Health and happiness. How about that, right? How just have a good time in life. How about that?
Yeah. Have fun. I think that's what it is. Maybe Singaporeans are not having enough fun.
Yeah.
And actually carving out time in a week to have fun. And I think that's really lacking.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many times a week are we actually allowed
Sorry.
Well, that too, but also actually to just laugh out loud and actually play, learn something new, actually get into the water and just splash around and actually have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, not with a purpose, not for some productivity reason.
Not to the gym. I'm actually saying fun, right?
Yeah.
I think that's probably what's lacking in all of us.
Yeah. I think if we were to, have open conversations with the people, around us, generally speaking, I think the majority of people are probably at most maybe having sex once a month, or if
Back
not,
to the sex question.
if not, on holiday.
Yeah.
When you look at holistic well-being, I think it's a very important topic that has to be addressed and discussed and nurtured there too, right? It forms part of the onion layer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. I do want to talk about perimenopause, not just because it's a really hot topic right now, but because we know so that regular lay person knows so little about it. And I feel like I know a little bit more because I keep asking Shireen questions
Yeah.
about it. But maybe let's start here. Maybe to shoot Shireen first. What do people not know about the 10 years before menopause that you wish they did know?
So I would say that is a window of opportunity for women to act and to be proactive in terms of their health and well-being, because it's that time that what you do here in this period is going to determine how you are going to be able to live in your 60s, in your 70s, and into your 80s. And I think it's underappreciated. And I think there's a big knowledge gap as well on what does that period mean and why is it so important to be proactive. And if I do it, what are the potential benefits? And if I don't, what are the potential pitfalls and complications that are waiting around the corner?
So if am I right to say we're talking about women maybe in their mid to late 30s or early 40s in this sort of 10-year period before menopause? There's some stuff that we can be thinking about to sort of set ourselves up for significantly healthier 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. What are some of those fundamental sort of blocks that we can think about?
Yeah, I think it's understanding from a woman's perspective what is happening on a biological level in your body and what are the so-called consequences of that. And I think if you go back to that, then that sets the stage for what you need to be doing, right? Because it comes down to bone, muscle, and making sure, and then from that, if you go, that comes down to foundational things like nutrition, your exercise. How do you build that to make sure that you're in a really good place before you turn 60, 70, 80?
Yeah.
And so, like, however you want to skin the cat, let's get into it. Yeah, do you want to dig into the exercise component a little bit? Do you want to dig into the hormones of it? Let's try and help people understand that at a deeper level.
Yeah, maybe I think it's important that women know perimenopause period of time is very variable. And, for some, it can last 3 months. Others, it can be up to 10 years. So it's very individualized and variable in that sense, right? But we've got to look backwards. So taking menopause as that moment in time when you stopped having a period for 12 months. When I explain it, I sort of try to use the analogy of a factory, right? So the factory at menopause.
You can do that. How many people will be mad at me if I use that analogy?
It's a simple way to sort of understand it, right? So your factory at menopause is sort of like it's shutting down, right? It's no longer working. And that's your hormones and everything that's attached to that. And in the period before the factory starts to, or is shut down essentially, what's happening is your hormones are shifting. Like the factory workers are suddenly resigning and they're walking out on you, right? And so things are a bit chaotic in this period when your hormones are fluctuating and because it's so integral in our biological and chemical processes in the body, the effects thereof is what causes the symptoms that you present with. So, for example, and they're all tied to the fluctuations of the hormones. And there's, I think, over 150 odd symptoms that are clustered, right? Oh. And it's because you've got these hormone receptors on every cell in your body. as a female. But some of the common things, women start to, have brain fog. They've got changes in their hair and their skin, loss of libido, vaginal dryness. All of a sudden, they may start notice they're getting more urinary tract infections. You've got changes in weight and weight fluctuations. They start to notice that they're picking up weight. They haven't really changed much in their diet or their exercise, but the weight gain is there, particularly around the midsection. If they've been doing annual health screening, they start maybe to see on the blood biomarkers that their cholesterol levels are starting to tick up. Their visceral fat, if they're doing body composition scans, starts to slowly tick up over time. And so all of that is as a result of, what the hormones are doing and the role that they play in our body. Estrogen is your anti-inflammatory hormone, right? It plays a big role in kind of warding off inflammation outside of the sexual reproductive role that it plays. Progesterone is the calming hormone, right? And oftentimes progesterone is the first hormone that starts to drop, and that's why sleep starts to become fragmented. And so all the inflammatory, the achiness or the frozen shoulders or some of the musculoskeletal symptoms that women may present with is as a result of the inflammation that is no longer being contained because you don't have enough of, let's say, the estrogen that is helping to ward that off. But that being said, because the symptoms are quite varied, we also need to make sure that there's no other medical conditions that are also presenting in the same way. So for example, you could be iron deficient, and that's going to play into, and if your ferritin levels are low, for example, you could have a lot of hair shedding, or your energy levels are going to be affected. So those are the things and the intricacies of where nutritional testing, for example, making sure that your thyroid is working as it should be. All of those things need to be excluded first before we look at, or before we can make a clinical diagnosis of, this is perimenopause. But that's sort of the gist of it.
Yeah. So symptoms, yes, and if you feel that some of this stuff is going on, women would come and see someone like you, and I'm assuming that's sort of where the investigation starts, right? Yes, you do have these symptoms, and now we're going to do these tests. Yep. What are the tests that you typically have women do?
So, like what Shireen's mentioned, we will do the nutritional profile, right? So we're doing the iron studies, we're doing the thyroid profile, we're doing a vitamin B12, folate, vitamin D. We're testing the full blood count to see what your hemoglobin levels are, what's your MCH, what's your MCV, your RDW. All of those things actually give us a snapshot into what's happening inside of the body. But on top of that, if you're particularly looking at someone who is potentially perimenopausal, we want to also have a look at what the female hormones are doing, right? It just gives us a little glimpse at what's happening to that woman at that point in time. I mean, look, we're not going to base whether a woman is perimenopausal only on those blood tests, but we're also looking at all the other symptoms that a woman's gone through. And if we treat the symptoms, we don't just treat the numbers. And that's really important for women to realize. We can't diagnose perimenopause looking at numbers. We have to talk about how her symptomology looks like.
Is it fair for me to say then success in treatment of it is mostly about how the person feels?
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Yeah, but also looking at her periods, right? So if we do know that in perimenopause, the cycles start to get shorter. Sometimes the blood losses are a little bit more intense. So instead of, having, day one a little bit lighter and then day two it's kind of really flooding, day three starts to get lighter again, it might just come all in a rush. And then, or maybe some women also say that, hey, my periods are getting lighter and lighter and lighter every single time, but they're coming shorter and shorter. So they might have maybe a bleed every 3 weeks instead of every 4 or 5 weeks, right? So all of those shifts actually kind of tell us a little bit more about what's happening inside of her body.
Am I right to say then it seems like when it comes to helping a woman through this phase and helping her, feel better, feel more like herself again, it's a more involved process than what I probably had in my head about a medical intervention.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm not well, I go see a doctor, I get medication, and then I move on.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that at all.
No, see, we're not treating just purely the problem. We are treating the symptoms. We're treating the individual. I mean, people often say that, hey, I've got a cold, I need to go see a doctor. Actually, you will get better even without seeing a doctor. You just have to have time invest in, good, sufficient food. But with perimenopause, it might be a little bit different. Yes, you'll continue living, but how are we allowing her quality of life to improve? Because she is halfway through her life. Do you know what I mean? Like, we live maybe up to 70 or 80. That'd be nice, won't it? But when a woman's actually experiencing perimenopause, she's in the middle of her life. She's 40. She's still got half her life left to live. How can we maximize her quality of life in those very important parts of her entire career, her lifespan? How are we going to improve her life at that point in time? She would probably be having kids maybe, or she might have had kids, and now she's still in the top of her career path, right?
Yeah.
How are we going to help her at that point in time?
And I think then, maybe taking that or adding on is the quality of life, but then also how do we, by supporting her from a metabolic standpoint as well, how do we reduce the risk then of her developing cardiovascular events later on when she's postmenopausal? How do we prevent osteoporosis and osteopenia from developing in her 60s and her 70s, right? That's what we can do here, and why I mentioned I like to view it as this is your window of opportunity now for us to start looking at that, because we know, one, women outlive men, and two, I think it's 65 or 67% of women, our cause of death is cardiovascular events. So we're talking about heart attacks and strokes, right? We also know that more women have Alzheimer's than men as well. So how do we look at that from a preventive standpoint as well, protecting her future self now?
Is it fair for me to say that in order to take a proactive approach at your cognitive health and your cardiovascular health, if you pay attention to your hormonal health now in your 30s and 40s and 50s, you're going to be doing yourself a lot of favors there. And if we don't, we're putting ourselves at risk that we don't even realize.
100%. Yeah.
But also breast health. I think we need to talk about breast health as well. That's one of the major causes of death in women, right? Or morbidity. So actually making sure that we are screening regularly, or actually just feeling our breasts regularly. I think that's really important. I feel a lot of women don't touch them.
Yeah.
They're just
it's there.
Accessory is an appendage, right? But you need to actually feel them. You need to know how the breasts feel. And self-breast exams are important. And actually getting them screened, every year, every 2 years when you're 40, it's also very important.
Yeah.
Before we start on HRT, we need to do a breast exam. We need to have them checked as well.
Okay, can we talk about HRT a little bit? Right? Because we've been sort of dancing about it, and I do really appreciate the way the conversation has gone, because from both of you, it's been very much about fundamental building blocks. But let's just say you get patient notified, come through, and you've done your investigations, the right word, you've done your assessments. They have a bunch of the symptoms of perimenopause, and you've taken a look at their blood work, and you've spoken to them, and you realize, okay, this person is exercising well, they sleep pretty good, except it's broken for whatever reasons, and they try and eat well, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the sense is that the basic building blocks are only going to get them so far. I need to put this person on medication. What does that even look like? What does HRT even look like? Because what goes on? How often? What do we use? Is it injections? Is it what is this?
So particularly for women, it is estrogen, progesterone, and sometimes testosterone, right? So estrogen really just helps them with the symptoms of, saggy skin, feeling a little bit more womanly, right? It helps them with their moods. It helps them lift them up a little bit more. Progesterone helps with cycles, and if they are having very short cycles, helping them lengthen them out a little bit. It kind of gets them a bit more calm, because I find that with a lot of women, when they're perimenopausal, they get a little bit edgy, a bit grizzly.
Right? So it's not my fault.
It's not entirely your fault.
Not entirely.
Like it kind of gets them a little bit calmer, sleeping a little bit better. And then testosterone is for the libido. It's for the drive, right? Some women come to me and say, I'm lacking my drive. I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't have that ambition to achieve. And that's not who I am. I am an achiever. I'm a type A personality. And if they are lacking all of that, sometimes we test it and we have a look at the testosterone and it's like at zero. Sometimes even just supplementing a little bit might actually help too. So estrogen in general, if you're lacking it, we'll put you on a little bit of gel, for instance.
Like literally just a gel.
Just a gel on the lower limbs, right? Or on the upper arms, whatever, right? And then progesterone would be sometimes cyclical, sometimes it's continuous, depending on what the woman needs. And testosterone, there are lots of ways we can do it. I like the troches that you just put under your lip, and that might be all that you need.
Okay. Anything to add to that about sort of the treatment of it or the management of it and the sort of relationship with the client over the time?
Yeah, I think I would say from a health coaching perspective, it's easier to do because it's okay. Besides progesterone is a tablet generally taken at night, estrogen gel or patch, testosterone, different forms, but we also have a gel that you can put on daily. And it's a journey that you go on. It's not I think this is where I often try to educate clients is, you shouldn't expect that you're going to take this now and tomorrow you're going to be feeling great. It's a journey that you embark on with your provider. And we take things slow. And as we go, we're checking in to see how is this particular. So you start off with the lowest possible dose that you think is going to be effective. And it's given and you come back and it's evaluated, right? What is the improvement? How have you responded to this particular dose? Because every person is their own individual. And so if you think about whether you're taking an oral progesterone at night or you're putting the estrogen gel as a transdermal form to be absorbed through your skin, what we're putting on doesn't mean that that's what you're going to absorb, right? Everybody's body is unique. And so we have to be guided by how that particular patient is responding over time and adjust it accordingly. So it's a journey that you embark on. And it's not we give it to you once and we let you go. You're closely followed up. And as things shift over the years, so does, the adjustment that these hormones what needs to be done needs to adjust alongside that. Once you hit post-menopause period, all of those things. So I would say it's a journey and not just a immediate intervention and you're just left to fend for yourself.
I like calling it a partnership between the service provider and the patient or the client, because it's a long partnership. It's not just a one-time, adjustment.
Yeah.
You have to kind of play with each other to see how it pans out for you.
Yeah.
And it takes 3 months. So I often say it doesn't happen overnight. Like you said, we have to keep monitoring. And sometimes you'd have to give it 3 months to see if it works for you or if it doesn't, because that's how long it takes to maximize and optimize in the body.
Yeah.
I think the idea of partnership is super strong. I think it's such a model of care that I can sort of get behind in a way that I haven't felt in a really long time, right? Because I feel like the world sort of needs it as well. Medical professionals who are willing to walk the miles with you and who are like all about the long-term journey versus just pumping out patients at a clinic. Not that there's anything wrong with that, whatever.
It works.
But to be able to provide an ecosystem where we're trying to help you through the entire journey that you're going to walk through.
Yeah. I think that's how medicine should shift too, because it's not you're not just entering into a GP setting and getting the meds and off you go. You actually have to journey with the client and the patient. And I think that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I think matters should and is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think my advice to women would be that you're in the driver's seat. And if you're, after the age of 30, I want you to understand that the decisions that you make from your 30s onwards are going to impact how the rest of your life is going to unfold, and the risks that you're potentially going to be up against, or the ones that you can mitigate. And so take the time to invest in educating yourself around what this period means for you. Because the more educated you are, and I will say, make sure you're getting your information from credible sources and having those discussions with your providers and finding one that you can relate to is hugely important. Because if this is a partnership, this is the kind of person that you're going to be wanting to go to on a regular basis, and know that they're invested in your future self as much as you are invested in it. Yeah, this is the time that you should be thinking about, how do I make certain decisions, informed decisions, that's going to set me up for a better 30, 40 decades moving forward.
Wow, you took those words out of my mouth.
That was super good. I was like,
I feel like I was, I know, I was like thinking about it, and then you just said it, and I was like, oh my God, okay, wait, now what?
Say ditto.
I was like, I want to be a woman now too.
Oh my gosh, I don't think I can up that.
No, we can wrap there. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh,
Make sure you
it was
guys do.
fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.